to do, then let's talk about Hill House over our next hour or so. Okay, so I only had you guys reading the first 3 chapters this week. Pretty much what we're getting in our first 3 chapters is introductions to all the characters. So this is very much a book about with good characters. All the ghostly stuff hasn't really happened much yet. So that'll be next week's when all the action in the book really kicks off. But I think just doing the first 3 chapters does give us a lot to talk about. Plus, it's a nice little break just reading 3 chapters after doing Dracula over the last 3 weeks, which was real long. Right? So this is kind of a breather week in a way. But just to give you guys a little bit of context about this book before we dive into the discussion, this book was written in the 50s, in the 1950s. So this was actually the most recent thing in the class we're going to read. Most of the stuff we read is 19th century. But this was written in 1959 by the great author Shirley Jackson. Jackson's also famous for writing a bunch of short stories. Her most famous short story is called The Lottery. The Lottery is a story about this small town that has an annual custom of stoning someone every year. Right? It's like this little small town. They get together every year to stone somebody, and they pick whoever that person is off a lottery. Right? So that story has a bit of a dark undertone. I sometimes do that one in this class. But she's a very famous writer. She was the wife of a college professor, a college English professor. I'm not sure which. It was one of the big fancy Northeastern schools. I'll actually Google this real quick, just to I didn't refresh myself on that detail. Let me tell you which school it was. Now, her husband's name was Dr. Stanley Hyman. Which school was it that he taught at? Bennington College in Vermont. Bennington College. So it wasn't one of the Ivies. It's Bennington College is a very well-respected private school up in the Northeast. But her husband was a college English professor. The guy was a complete slime ball. I mean, she had a really bad marriage. Her husband was a complete slime ball. He would do stuff. I mean, he messed around with his students and things like that. Right? He was a complete piece of work. So Jackson kind of lived in a very unsatisfying marriage. And there's a lot of undertones in her life that she might have actually been a lesbian writer. Right? There's lots of undertones that maybe there's a little bit of repression there. We're definitely going to talk a little bit about that today with our characters in this book. Theodora famously is there's lots of those sort of suggestions about her character in this book. But yeah, she lived this pretty awful marriage. Her husband pretty much she was a great writer, but her husband pretty much tried to manage her, the profits she gained from these books, things like that. Jackson died at a very young age, I think, too. Let me double check that for you. Yeah, she died in 1965. So she died, let's see, in her mid 40s. So she died of a heart attack at the age of 48. So she's a giant. She's a giant in the horror space. This book, Haunting a Hill House, is one of the most influential horror novels ever written. People like Stephen King have kind of looked at it as being one of the masterpieces of American lit. Not just horror lit, but even American lit in general. I personally myself value this novel in very high esteem. I think this is probably one of my top 5 novels ever, in my opinion. Like, I think this is a great book. This book's had a bit of a revival over the past couple of years because the 2018 Netflix show. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the Netflix show, but it's very good. It's very well done, but it's a lot different than the book. But
that's what I was about to ask. Does it follow the book or not at all? Because I was thinking about watching it while reading, like, doing both, but I didn't want to. It was different. I didn't want to.
It's got some differences, but I don't think that the differences are necessarily bad, if that makes sense. I think that the differences add to it. I mean, it's an adaptation that adds to the original, I think. That makes sense. First time I watched the first episode, and I was like, this is way different from the book. I don't like this. Right. But I actually went and gave it a rewatch earlier this year, and I thought it was really good. So I would recommend it. The additions made are good additions, I think. But it has been adapted a couple of times over the years. The Netflix show is the most recent. But there was a 60s film adaptation of it called Just the Haunting. It was called The Haunting. That film was excellent. Like, it's very well done, very true to the novel. And they did a 99 version that was also called The Haunting. And that movie's famously bad, right? The movie's horrible. It's one of those movies, though, that's horrible. That's so bad it's good, if that makes sense. Like, that one had Liam Neeson, who played Dr. Montague. Owen Wilson plays Luke. Catherine Zeta-Jones plays Theodora, and it's very over the top way. Right. So that one's got ghosts going boo at you the whole time, right? That one's very cheesy and over the top, but I still like it even though it's bad. So, but the 60s movie called The Haunting and the Haunting of Hill House TV show, those are the two really good adaptations of it. Oftentimes people get the 60s haunting film confused with House on Haunted Hill, which is a different movie with Vincent Price. They're two different films. But very, very influential Gothic novel. So far as what we've been reading, we've mostly just got introduced to all our characters: Eleanor, Theodora, and the Doctor, and Luke. We've also gotten an introduction to Hill House as a character of sorts here. I mean, Hill House is our setting here, but it's also a character, if that makes if that makes sense. It's very similar to Fall of the House of Usher as far as like this house like being uncanny and spooky in a way. So I'll just turn the floor over to you guys. What's some of your guys' initial impressions of this book, just based on the first 3 chapters? I don't know. You guys can take us anywhere here, but how are you guys doing with it so far?
I'm about finished with the book.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. The big things that stick out in my mind from the beginning of the book, I guess, would be Eleanor's story. You know, it's half my car. No, you can't have it. I'm taking it anyway. And then stopping at the diner, whenever she was down there and the letter told her not to stop, she stopped anyways. And it kind of builds on what kind of person she is. She stopped and she looked at trees and she's just kind of enjoying, her independence for the first time. She spent so much time taking care of her mom that I don't think she had really developed as a person yet. And then her going to Hill House, I guess it's supposed to be like symbolic of her leaving all that behind and starting to grow as a person. And then she arrives at this town and they're basically to put your tail between your legs and run. And then it goes on, it introduces the husband and the maid. I forget what their names are.
Right. The Dudleys.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far. I thought it was cool that how he described the house. It's kind of a central chamber with, rings around the chambers. It's like they built it out instead of in. There's a lot going on in the story. I like it. Anybody else?
I really like Eleanor's character a whole lot, and I feel really bad for her because she's been surrounded by people her whole life, but she's so lonely. Like, I feel for her when it comes to that. And I have a bad feeling that something bad's gonna happen to her, and I don't want it to, because I really like her character.
I'm trying to keep a straight face here. I'm trying to get my best poker face. So I don't know how good I am at poker though. So.
I am on the 4th part of chapter 1, mainly because I've been in so much pain. But Eleanor's
What's been going on with you, Irene?
I fell and broke my pinky, but they couldn't cast it. But I'm just busted up really bad. But I'm gonna agree that Eleanor's character right now is really interesting because you get this sheltered person that's just now getting out into the world, and I'm interested to see when she does actually get to the house. Well, now I'm interested in her journey to the house. So I just made it past the part where she literally ran over the old lady and she's trying to apologize for it.
Yeah, she's very much a character sort of stuck in limbo, right? I think he said it really well there, right? Where she hasn't really became her own person yet. Right? She spent all of her time being a caretaker for her mother, right? That she hasn't really developed herself yet, which is very sad to say the least. Haley, what do you think of the book so far?
I personally have to agree with what Irene and Taylor kind of touched up on how she hasn't really got out into the world yet. She's still kind of in her own shadow personality.
Right. Yeah, we get this rebellious streak from her here at the beginning, right? Like she has partial ownership of this car, right? Her sister's like, no, you're not going to take it. And she's just like, well, screw you, right? I'm going to take it. So she's been a person. She seems like a kind of a passive person, right? A person who's been used to just going along with the flow of the tide. Right? Suddenly, all at once, she's exerting a personality, you know, and other people around her don't like it. So lots to be said there.
What about the falling stones? You know, first thing that popped into my house, first thing that popped into my mind was Rose Red. You know, what kind of influence did Shirley Jackson have on Rose Red and Stephen King?
Yeah, I'm sure that there was a big one there. Yeah, King has written stuff about this novel, how much he likes it and stuff. So I'm sure that there is a influence there, Jacob. Yeah, we learned that about Eleanor, right? There was some type of like psychic phenomenon that happened to her, right, when she was a kid with these falling stones. Yeah, what you guys will find out that the further you read through this thing, once you probably agree with me here, Jake. Once things start picking up, the big question that's going to be raised in the novel often is whatever is happening to Eleanor, is it real, right, or is she completely unreliable, right? Is she seeing stuff, right? So,
Well, I'd kind of lean towards it's actually happening because of what ends up happening to Theodora and Theodora's clothes. You know, they were together, and then this happened in a separate room, and Theodora found it, not Eleanor. So I think it kind of takes away from Eleanor being, you know, this masked crusader of torturing everybody.
yeah, there's going to be some spooky stuff happen the further we go, right? Jacob mentioned one, right, where there's going to find some bloody clothes. But we're going to come to some spooky stuff that's going to happen. And as you keep reading, that's going to be something to ask yourself. Like, what do you think this is real, or is this Eleanor just snapping? Right. So Jackson, I think, paints her really well early, as being someone who's someone who's clearly struggling with her mental health here at the beginning of the story. But so yeah, we got Eleanor as a character. Theodora is our other lady character here, right? I mentioned, so let me find the exact passage. It's really early on when she's introduced. Yeah, but around page 4 or 5 of the story is when she's introduced. But it talks about here, like I said, remember this book's written in the 50s. So the 50s was definitely, in American lit, the 50s was kind of like the Victorian age for the Brits, right? It was an age of propriety and manners, and like stuff wasn't talked about openly, right? But yeah, it mentions early here her relationship with her with her roommate, right? So they call it her companion here. I think that's what they call it. But we learn that she goes to Hill House after the invitation because she says she had plunged blindly, wantonly into a violent quarrel with a friend with whom she shared an apartment. Things were said on both sides which only time could eradicate. Theodora had deliberately and heartlessly smashed the lovely little figurine her friend had carved of her, and her friend had cruelly ripped to shreds the volume of Alfred de Musset, which had been a birthday present from Theodora, taking particular pains with the page which bore Theodora's loving, teasing inscription. These acts were, of course, unforgettable. Before they could laugh over them together, time would have to go by. Theodora had written that night, accepting Dr. Montague's invitation, and departed in cold silence the next day. So for the 50s, right, that's about as open as it got, right? But she was in a relationship. Theodora was in a relationship with another woman. When it comes to Gothic horror, right? As you guys already know, this type of thing, oftentimes in Gothic horror, is represented in interesting ways, right? That aren't always spelled out. So a lot of what will come about with Theodora, right? It'll be interesting to have you guys think about, like, what's Jackson doing with his character, right? Is she punishing her for maybe being a lesbian? And so I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about that the further we go. I don't know if all you guys picked up on that. Did you guys pick up on that when you were reading? That's kind of what she was hinting at there, the passage I just read you.
I'm sorry, I missed that whole conversation.
We were talking about Theodora's the lesbian undertones to her character, right? With her having her roommate, right? How she had a quarrel with her roommate. I was asking if you guys picked up on that.
I didn't think twice about it until you said it just now, but now that makes complete sense.
Right.
Well, I didn't pick up
Yeah.
on that, but it seemed like she was the first one to console Eleanor. Anytime something had happened in the house, rather than it being Dr. Montague or
You froze there on us, Jacob. But and he said she was always the first to console him, right? Not to console Eleanor, not the male characters. You're back with us now, Jacob.
Okay, I was just saying, I didn't pick up on the whole roommate thing, but anytime that something had happened in the house, she was always first to console Eleanor. She was always first to comfort her, and you'd think that that'd be one of the men's roles, but it kind of became Theodora's. She was the one that kind of settled her down and pulled her back to reality, and she didn't seem quite as scared. I don't know where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I see where you're going with it. Right. Yeah, she always is very quick to comfort, right? These two have a lot of like flirtatious type banter back and forth with each other, right? Like it's very flirty dialogue between the two of them. Irene, was you going to say something there a second ago?
I did notice that. I thought like I wasn't really understanding what was said, so I went back and reread it, and that's what I took from it was that was that she was gay, and it was just odd for that, that time, because I never heard of it in the 50s, which I guess it happened, but
Right. That's how it was described in the 50s, right? Like that was your friend, right? Or your roommate or something like that, right? They didn't openly come out and say it, right? Wink, wink, right? So that's kind of how it was discussed back then. Her roommate, wink, wink, right? And that's kind of how they treated it. Two friends wouldn't smash each other's crap, right? Or do these like very personal things to each other, right? This is very much a very personal fight. So I bring this up. Of course, there's definitely more to her character than just that. I mean, that's part of her character, but that one trait doesn't necessarily define her character. But it does become a big part of the book, though, the further we go. As Jacob said, they have a pretty interesting relationship. She and Eleanor have a interesting, sometimes hostile relationship with each other the further we go. So that'll be something I'll be interested to talk about when we talk about the whole book next week. Is what you all make of their dynamic throughout the whole book. What does her sexuality have to do with any of that? Even as far as like the tricks that are played on Theodora and stuff, they seem kind of cruel. You probably know the one that I'm talking about there, Jacob. So,
Which one is that?
It was the one you mentioned with her clothes. Yeah.
Oh, what was, and that's right. The last part that I've really read is the clothes. But what did you think of the big spooky thing before that? The writing on the wall.
Eleanor come home.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
Yeah. Well, let's save that for next week. I mean, we don't want to spoil it. Yeah, there's something really spooky that happens really early in the next section, right after they stay the night for the first time. But we also have Dr. Montague's character here, right? Dr. Montague, he is a doctor of psychology, right? He's got a PhD in psychology. So he's the one who's starting all this stuff, right? He's bringing them together to Hill House to conduct this scientific experiment about the supernatural. Right, so he brings them all together for this sort of weird science experiment that he's doing to test I guess he's just testing how they react to certain stimuli. I don't think he necessarily thinks that this place is haunted. Right? He knows of the legends of the house and stuff like that. So he's getting them all together to understand, to come up with some type of scientific theory about the nature of fear and stuff like that. So he's kind of using them all as guinea pigs, right? Very unethically, even, right? To kind of see how they react to different things. So That's an interesting character in the book, just because you imagine that if his study worked out, I talked to you guys earlier about peer-reviewed journals. Right? If he submitted his study to a peer-reviewed journal, it probably wouldn't get published because they would say that it was unethical to use these people as guinea pigs without their consent to test their reactions to different things. So that's what he's doing, right? He's trying to come up with some type of scientific understanding of the nature of fear and things like that. So I don't know. Any thoughts on this character so far? You guys think what he's doing is wrong?
I don't know. For me, I guess he was pretty straightforward. He says, "Hey, I'm a psychology guy, and I want you to come out to this house and try to stay. And it's haunted, and don't talk to people." I think from the get-go, he didn't really hide anything. He's just kind of letting it play out. Yes, he's there for his own reasons, but all of them know what they're getting into. It's not a great secret at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Unless like it turns out later on in the book that he knows something or something like that. I don't necessarily think what he's doing is that wrong because, they came there with consent. It's not like he forced them to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with the two of you there, right? He is open. He doesn't describe his methods to them or anything like that. But yeah, he brings them all together. They didn't have to go, right? They all choose to. Yeah, so this guy is just doing a science experiment here, right? What's the nature of fear and things like that. Later in the book, we'll get introduced to his wife as a character. His wife comes. I'll be interested to hear what you had to say about her because she's very overbearing and things like that. She comes with. She kind of like. There's as you guys will find out, there's almost a weird relationship with him and his wife, right? Where she almost seems to have like this boyfriend, right? There's a whole open marriage type of thing that you'll find out about. That's pretty wild. Further we go. Yeah, so I saw your message, Irene, about the loud kids. Right? I'm glad you found your son was it your son or your daughter last week at the school, by the way? And I'm glad you worked that out.
It was my daughter. She had actually got to the upstairs of the grade school. It was empty. Didn't have a janitor in it. And she had slammed the door because I guess on the upstairs they keep those fire doors shut to the stairway. And she didn't know that you had to push the button on the handle and pull it toward her. And it was, quit fighting. No.
Yeah, we were all very concerned last week when you randomly left us. So
Yeah, oh my God, I could hear her running like all over the top floor, but I couldn't find her. And she was trying to get to me, and I was trying to find her, and I was screaming, and it was awful. So tonight, her daddy took her with them because they had basketball again tonight, and I was too sore to go.
we had to get back to the book. We also have Luke's character here, right? He's he just happens to be the guy who's going to inherit Hill House. We find out about him.
Well, that's Luke. I don't know why I thought it was David.
What is it, Jacob? You thought his name was David?
Yeah, it's been 2 days since I last read, and I was thinking the other guy was David instead of Luke, but it's Luke.
Yeah, we get his character portrait here. Like his aunt is the one who owns Hill House. So far, I don't think we've gotten an explanation yet. I'm not. See, I was mostly going on my memory of the book today.
And next for what?
And the explanation for how Luke's family came to inherit the house. Did we go in? Did they go into that in chapter 3?
With the companion of the older sister?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole thing, but I don't think it was in the first 3 chapters.
I think it was.
Was it?
In the 3rd chapter, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we learn that the original owner of the house, his name was Ukraine. And his daughters inherited the house after him. There's apparently some spooky stuff going on with Ukraine. But even the way that he had the house built in a strange and odd manner. But it was his daughter, right, who eventually got the house. They fought over it. And then there was a scandal where his daughter was supposedly murdered. Was his daughter murdered in the house by, again, an insinuation of like a possible lover. So, and that's how Luke gets the house, right? He inherits it from, or Luke's family inherits it from that line. We get a whole long history there of what happened in Hill House leading up to everything. We learn that no one has stayed in it very long ever since, right? Because these strange phenomenon happen. So no one ever stays very long once they get there. So again, that'll raise the question. The further you guys go, is things that are happening real, or is it characters snapping? I'll be interested to hear about what you guys have to think the further we go here. And then we got the Dudleys, who Jacob mentioned earlier, right? We get this creepy maid in the house, right? She's like, Hill House. My house is like 10 miles away from here. I will never go out in the dark in the night. Right? She's always very dramatic about it, right? She always does the same phrase over and over, in the dark, in the night. She goes a little over the top with it, right? She's pretty much one of the main sources of comedy in the book. Did you guys get a kick out of her as she was reading it?
Yeah, and they accuse her of closing the doors and such. He said he was going to nail them open.
I thought it was creepy when she told him that nobody could hear him, no matter like how they yelled or anything.
Yeah, we can't hear you no matter how loud you scream. Right? She's always very emphatic about when dinner time is too, right? She's like, dinner is always at 6. And I always serve breakfast at 8. She's very, she definitely sticks to the schedule.
Yeah, she denies some coffee after 9 o'clock.
I mean, if it works for her, she's still kicking.
Yes, that's how she's usually played. She's usually played for. Whenever you see an adaptation of this right there, she's usually played for laughs. It's being like, oh, kind of like the overly suspicious rural person, right? Very suspicious of supernatural things. And she's often kind of painted in that type of way. Her husband, we don't really get a lot of character development for him, right? He's just a random guy out guarding the gate to Hill House. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Hill House itself before we go to, especially some of the descriptions we get of it. Very first page of the novel, right? We get a lot of. I think the very first paragraph of this whole thing is beautifully written, as far as even like painting a portrait of what his Hill House actually is. It says no live organ. It's almost, remember the imp of the perverse at the beginning of class, right? This passage almost seems reminiscent of that. It says no live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. Right, so pretty cool first paragraph as far as like setting the tone. I think right there early. Well, we get lots of stuff here as far as the description of the house. We get that inside the house, as Jacob said earlier, right, the geometry of the house seems a little off. Right, maybe not as off as something like in Lovecraft, right, where they talk about the lost cities, right? Maybe not as off as that, but something seems a little off inside this house, even with like the design and architectural choices.
And they talk about Hugh Crane designing the house and how he, purposely made it off-centered like that. But I didn't really get the effect of how bad it was until Eleanor was trying to look up at the tower. And Luke said that when he had found her, she was almost, what was it, laying sideways or something, trying to look at the top of this tower. She was standing sideways before he caught her. She was getting ready to fall, just trying to look at a tower that was supposed to be directly up from her, but it ended up being above and behind her.
Right. Yeah, this uncanniness about what's off with the dimensions. I think it's something that's really well done with the written word here, right? It's kind of hard to imagine it, like how would it look in reality. But it's interesting to think about like something. This place is so big, it's so gigantic, right? Rooms are in weird places. You can get lost in the house. It's almost like a maze. Right. It is very interesting stuff.
It reminds me of Hogwarts, but scary.
Right.
Talking about all the rooms and stuff and hallways and
Scary Hogwarts, right? Yeah, I'll move so you can see my background here. But the background I have put up is actually the Hill House from the TV show. So that's how it looks in the TV show. Yeah, it definitely looks like spooky Hogwarts there, Taylor. And they speculate early on in the book about was there secret rooms in there. They even call the house sick at one point early in chapter 3. Like they say the house is leprous and sick. So I don't know. What do you guys think of that idea? Do you guys think certain places just have this bad vibe to them? Or do you guys think that there actually are like? Do you guys have a belief that there are like haunted places like this? Some places just even just you walk by or whatever, you just get like this chilly effect down your spine. Right? Have you guys ever felt that way about a certain place? Something might be off about it.
I have, to be honest. But to actually be in like a for real scary haunted place, I haven't. But there's been some houses like here in Harts Creek or on Mud Fork we went by and it just too eerie for me to go near.
Right. Maybe sometimes you can't even explain it. Like, why do you feel that way about it? Just something seems uncanny way about it.
I feel that way about hospitals, but not like in a scary way, but like I feel like every time I go to a hospital, like even if nothing's wrong, like if I'm just seeing somebody who had their tonsils took out or something like that, I always get like really bad anxiety at hospitals, and just it's a sad place to be.
Right. Yeah, the sort of sterilized nature of the place too, right? The way the floors look and the walls and all that, right? That doesn't in the hospitals. That's a little unsettling in a way. Yeah, I don't like them either, right? I hope you're not going into the medical field here, Taylor. I hope you're not. I hope you're not.
I am actually.
Are you?
But I am. But I do feel that way about hospitals. I remember like one time I was sitting in the staircase when my grandma was real sick. I remember I was sitting in that staircase and I just remember thinking, I wonder how many people have like came in here for just like privacy because they were so upset or they just heard really bad news or someone they love had passed away. Like I just remember, if walls could talk, like the staircase of a hospital, like it's crazy.
Right. The place has memories, so to speak. Right. Yeah, that's kind of how Jackson paints Hill House here, right? This place has memories. Right? It's got history. Maybe that history leaves something behind, something that we can't even like, something that's not even matter, right? Something that's not tangible that we can touch, but maybe it does leave something behind, so to speak. Just like how you just mentioned, like in a hospital, maybe there's memories like that are left behind.
This kind of reminds me of the first season of American Horror Story. I think it was the first season, The House.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched? It kind of gives me like the same feeling. It might be based off of it. I don't know.
Yeah, the murder house. Yeah, that was a good season of the show. I haven't watched it in the past 5 or 6 years. I'm behind.
I haven't either. I'm not like a huge fan of it, but I did really like that season.
Yeah, I'll just pitch in here too and say I've had this experience. I think that some places just naturally have this unsettling feeling. There's they do like the owners of this place commercialize it every year around Halloween. But there's a place in Mercer County. It used to be an old abandoned amusement park from Lake Shawnee. Yeah, that
I
place
went
is like,
there.
yeah. What do you think of it, Taylor?
I agree. It's got some creepy vibes to it. Like it's unsettling.
Yeah, you learn, that people, that like kids died there by like falling off their Ferris wheel, and
There was a bunch of freak accidents, wasn't there? Like I'd say at least 10 before it shut down. I can't remember.
a truck hit a kid, I think. There's lots of stuff like that happened there
Someone drowned.
in that
Very
lake.
traumatic, very traumatically too. Like it wasn't just like a regular drowning.
It went all the way back to like the Native Americans, because apparently like there was a family of settlers that lived there, and Native Americans like murdered them on their land. So something about the place is just off. I can't even like explain why. Something about it just feels off if you go there.
I agree. I agree 100%. It's a creepy place.
The Ferris wheel's all mossy, right, where it's been left to rot over the years, things like that. So, yeah, Sigmund Freud called that the uncanny, right? Something seems off, but you can't quite explain what it is. Like that feeling's called the uncanny. So,
Wasn't there one child who died from he was on the swings and like he went around and hit something?
I think that was the truck. I think the
Yeah,
truck.
yeah, he went into a truck, didn't he? I mean, that's just too many. Like one or two freak accidents, okay, but I mean, after so many, something's going on there.
Right. Yeah, we went. My wife and I went there a couple of years ago. It is quite a place. And next Halloween, if you guys get curious, go there. It's worth a day trip. So yeah, I feel like we got a pretty good intro here to some themes of the novel we're going to encounter. Like this, like I said, this is very much a character-driven book. Very much a character-driven book. The narration is much. I mean, we get a third-person narrator here telling us the story, so we're going back to that. More of like a Hawthorne style narrator here, more so than a Poe style narrator. We still get an unreliable character though, so we still have that element here showing up. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say about it next week when we reconvene. Like I said, as far as what we read so far, the action hasn't really took off yet, but starting in chapter 4, stuff's gonna start hitting the fan. So I will leave you to it. Finish it up through next week. All right. So we'll call it there for the night. So we'll see you guys again next week.
All right. See ya.
See you, Jacob. See you, Taylor, Irene.
Bye.